Good morning, everybody. So as promised, today we are going to talk about what happens if I miss a day, right? It's a 66-day challenge, and let's face it, starting a new behavior is tough, right? And so there will be times that you're not successful. Speaking of successful, boom, day 12 complete for me. All right, so first, I just checked off my X on the calendar. If you missed the day, I would encourage you to not check the day off, right? Like you can't say, oh, shucks, I missed it today, but I had a good reason. I'm going to make the mark anyway because I'm moving forward towards 66, right? I'd also actually encourage you not even to make a big circle or a big slash or some other mark that distinguishes it as not being successful, but it's still you making a mark on the calendar. That could confuse your dopamine input, right? Like we want to be happy about the success of the X. That's part of making that checklist. So maybe a little hash mark on the side of that week, that 6-day stretch, maybe a hash mark on the back if you want, or just skip it, right? I think, the people that really like to track things are going to want to be able to track those misses and make sure that they're not having too many. And also really make sure that you don't miss more than one in a row. So if you missed one, don't miss the second day. This is all about creating sequential successes. So if you start missing more than one day, you're actually starting to create the bad habit again. So one day miss, and then just skip it, move on. So the next question you need to ask yourself is why? Why did I miss? Also, why am I doing this, right? Habit forming is hard. And if we're not firmly rooted into the reason that we're trying to form this particular habit, then we're probably not going to be successful, right? If you have chosen to do that habit because somebody else suggested it, then you may not have the right one. You might not have something that's meaningful to you, and you might not have something that you're going to dig into until you become successful. So I would challenge you to look at yourself and go back to, is it the right habit to be starting with? So that was day 2, by the way. That was our videos on the focusing question. What one thing can I do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So if you're having a tough time with that particular habit, it might not have been the right habit. Maybe you wrote down the wrong thing. Giovanni is focusing on waking up at 6 a.m. in order to do computer programming. So is the habit waking up at 6, or is the habit working on designing his game for half an hour, right? So there's kind of 2 in that habit. Which one is the habit that's correct to form? Which one is the lead domino? Which one is more meaningful? Which one is the point, right? So second, you should be making sure that you schedule those habits if you're missing them more often, right? And pay attention to the calendar before you even pick that habit, right? So I mentioned in the very, very first video for me that I'm skipping bread, and it's going to end just in time for Thanksgiving. I could go one of 2 ways at Thanksgiving, right? It's either I want my habit to be formed that by Thanksgiving I've resisted the temptation and skipped bread on Thanksgiving, which is where I want to go. Or I could say, hey, I'm trying to form this bread habit, and Thanksgiving I'm going to eat some bread again. And then I go into the holidays, and I've got Christmas and New Year's and lots more bread and starchy and bready foods. So I think that's a word. So if I had decided to start that habit the week before Thanksgiving, what do you think my chances are for success would be? Marty mentioned in his accountability that he hadn't thought about camping trips when he was talking about some of the exercises he was going to be doing in order to hit his goal of tougher rock climbing levels. And so he modified his habit. You notice that what he put in there, what he changed it to, was actually making sure that he did certain strengthening exercises, even if he couldn't do the initial exercise that he had thought was the right habit. So So that's a good practice, right? Reevaluate, look at that habit, figure out what it is that's forming, figure out whether or not the days that you've already spent time on it fit into the new idea or new habit that you've got written down. And if not, start a new one. No big deal. Like, you figured out that we have another habit that we should have been concentrating on, and we go with that, right? I can't tell you the number of times that I've decided I was going to cut something out of my diet only to just not. So I had to figure out where those stumbling blocks were and figure out whether or not that means I started on the right thing, right? Like, I didn't just start waking up at 6 a.m. and exercising for an hour and stretching for half an hour and reading a book and journaling, right? Like, if you pick up too much at one time, you're going to fail. You have to start with the challenge that, again, feels right to you and could be a building block for future successes and powerful habits. So next, after you've scheduled it, stick to the schedule. Okay? I know that sounds obvious, right? But it isn't always for everybody. Not everybody really follows a schedule. So if you're going to put a habit onto your calendar for 6 p.m. and say that I am going to exercise after work every day, and then you get caught in traffic. It hasn't been much this past year, but let's say there's an accident, God forbid, but and you end up being home late by an hour. Well, now it's not 6, it's 7. So are you going to exercise still? I would encourage you that no matter what you end up fitting in, let's say you had a rough morning waking up, let's say you hit the traffic, let's say whatever else it might be, that again, the habit is sequential successes. So I mentioned several videos ago that you might get into the car and just drive to the gym and exercise for 5 minutes, right? So if you lost an hour because of bad traffic, maybe that's the thing. You still go to the gym because that's the habit you're forming, going to the gym. And then exercise for whatever amount of time that you can, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. And that way you're still getting those X's and going to the gym each day. That's the building block, not going to the gym and working out for 15 minutes or going to the gym and working out for an hour. The building block is go to the gym every day, right? Finally, we had talked about creating an environment. So if you're having a tough time, and we all do, if you're having that tough time, did you create the right environment? Are you putting that bowl of fruit in front of the chips, or are you throwing away the chips, right? Did you set yourself up for success, right? Before you went to bed the night before, did you put out your running shoes? Did you put out your clothes? And that way when you wake up in the morning, they're like right there in your face. Did you put your calendar somewhere where the whole family could see it, right? Are you holding yourself accountable, right? So, and then finally, we spent a lot of time talking about the habit loop. We talked about cues, right? So did you track your cues to make sure your habit fit into the right place? Did you make it attractive? It's where we are in the habit loop right now. We just finished making it attractive. So is your family behind you? Did you join a tribe? And are you imitating habits of powerful people? And so if you missed a day, hopefully these help and you can strategize on how to not miss days in the future. Tomorrow, we're going to spend this last week finishing off the bottom half of that habit loop. And then we're going to look at how that applies to breaking bad habits. We've only talked about forming good habits so far. We haven't really talked at all about breaking bad habits, even though that's often what the habit challenge is for. And until then, thanks everybody. See you tomorrow morning.